Welcome to the Q Podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Welcome to another edition of the Q Ideas podcast. I'm Gabe Lyons, and today we're talking about the subject of happiness and joy. And this is so important. We are in a moment, in a season where, almost anybody you talk to, you can kind of hear a story where they're walking with a little bit of a limp coming out of these last 2 years. And they're also struggling to make sense of the world as they move forward. And they're questioning how to find joy, how to be happy. What does that even mean anymore? And it's really helped us look in the mirror and realize that if we've had an emptiness in that area, that there's probably work that needs to be done. And that work has to be cultivated. It's not something that you can just hope for one day to show up. It comes over time. And today, that's what we're going to learn about from Marie Clarkson. She wrote a book called Aggressively Happy, A Realist's Guide to Believing in the Goodness of Life. And in this conversation that was hosted at our Culture Summit around cultivating happiness, she really describes what does it look like for us to think about living a life of happiness, of joy in the midst of a world where there really will be difficulties and sorrows. And that's part of it. We don't get out of that. We still have to deal with that. But how do we deal with it? How do we think well about that? And how do we cultivate the kind of life that allows us to experience joy in the midst of any kind of circumstance? Now, Marie Clarkson serves as the books and culture editor at Plow. She's currently working on her doctorate in theology from St. Andrews University. And I think as you listen to this, you're going to be encouraged. You're going to be challenged. And she's going to give you some really practical ways that you can cultivate this in your life.
Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward path had been lost. But of the good which there I found, speak will I. Dante Alighieri, The Divine Comedy. Hello, my name is Joy Clarkson, and I'm the author of Aggressively Happy, A Realist's Guide to Believing in the Goodness of Life. In my own life, I think one of the greatest barriers to happiness has been the idea that if I reached a certain point, I would be happy. Whether that point was getting married or getting a job or finishing a degree or being in a place that really felt like it suited me. These are all kind of this experience that if I could only reach this certain point, then I could be happy. But what I've learned is that a lot of life is about navigating those dark forests, as Dante puts it, those places when we don't quite know what's next or what will be unfolding in our lives. I think that a lot of learning to cultivate happiness in this complicated life is learning to flounder well. So today I want to share with you 3 things that have helped me navigate the dark wood of life so that I could, as Dante says, speak of the good that I found there. And those 3 things are to listen to your life, to become the most interesting person in the world, and finally, to try not to be a total mess. So I'm going to share some thoughts about that with you today. The first thing I think that we need to do is to learn how to listen to our lives. I think that our first impulse when we feel lost in life, when we feel unhappy with where we are, is to try to rush somewhere else, to rush to the next thing that will make us happy. I use the word flounder here, and that makes me think of water. And if someone is drowning, that's often kind of what kicks in. It's our survival instinct. We want to get above water. But Marines say that actually the best way to not drown is often to stop moving, to take a deep breath if you can, and to take an account of your surroundings. And I think that can be true of life too. I think sometimes when we expend so much energy trying to get out of the dark wood of life or trying not to drown, we don't have the attention to see what God is doing in our lives, what might be a good step forward. One way I like to think of this is through comedy improv. If anyone has ever done improv games or seen an improv show, you'll know that there is one fundamental rule to improv, and that is yes and. In an improv game, you can never say no to your improv partner. You have to accept whatever reality they present to you. So if your improv partner says, there's a purple elephant raging through the grocery store parking lot, you have to accept that reality. But the fun part is that then you get to say, and. You get to add your own agency to reality. You get to introduce your own blue hippopotamus if you want to. And I think that's a lot like life. I think that we will be bad improv players at life if we don't first learn how to say yes to our lives. If you've ever watched improv and you've seen someone who had a difficult time accepting the reality their scene partner gave them, you would realize that it's a really painful experience. It's not funny. And I think that's true of life too. I think that when we don't know how to accept our lives for all of its limitations and warts and strangeness, it will be more painful for us than if we simply try to say yes to everything in our life, accept it as it is, and then move forward with our own agency and choice. So that begins with listening to your life. But that's hard because sometimes when we listen to our lives, we discover many things that we wish weren't there. There are aspects of our stories that we have no control over, whether it is our family or things that have happened to us, or frankly, the world and the generation that we find ourselves in. But when we also stop and listen to our lives, we see the beginning of hope. We begin to see that actually our choices make a difference. There's a poem that I read to myself when I'm having a hard time listening to my life. It's by the priest and poet Malcolm Guite that I want to read to you in hopes that it will help you listen to your life. It's about a singing bowl, which is this ancient tool used for meditation. You have a wooden dowel and it rolls around the edges of the bowl. And when it does this, it begins to evoke this very kind of resonant, quiet song. But to do that, you have to be slow and quiet and patient. And I think that's what our lives take. So let me read you this poem by Malcolm Guite. Begin the song exactly where you are. Remain within the world of which you're made. Call nothing common in earth or air. Accept it all and let it be for good. Start with the very breath you breathe in now, this moment's pulse, this rhythm in your blood, and listen to it ringing soft and low. Stay with the music. Words will come in time. Slow down your breathing. Keep it deep and slow. Become an open singing bowl, whose chime is richness rising out of emptiness, and timelessness resounding into time. And when the heart is full of quietness, begin the song exactly where you are. So this, I think, is the beginning to navigating the dark woods of our life. Begin the song exactly where you are. Accept the limitations and the confines of your life, and begin to add your own sparkle. Now, I use that word sparkle because I think the next aspect of learning how to flounder well is something a bit more active. And I like to think of this as becoming the most interesting person in the world. Now, if any of you all are interested in ad campaigns, you might remember the excellent Dos Equis ad campaign featuring Jonathan Goldsmith, in which he does various extravagant things like touching art, parking a train, and getting sandwiches on every continent in the world named after him. And at the end of all of these ads, it says, "He's the most interesting man in the world." Now, one of the things that I think that we lose out on in life is our capacity to be interesting. Human beings are so weird and wonderful. And in those seasons when you don't know where you're going, and you don't know what the next big thing is, one of the things that I found is the most helpful is simply to follow my nose and try to become a more interesting person in every area in my life. And often, doing that is precisely what leads us out of the dark wood. We can think that there's some profound, important thing out there, but often the delights, the desires, the interests of our own life is what leads us to what needs to come next. So in times when I didn't know which way to go, when I was working a kind of boring job, I started to think through different areas in my life in which I wanted to become more interesting. So that could be your physical life. Is there a skill that you've always wanted to master? Have you wanted to start being more healthy, exercising more, taking a dance class? It could also be intellectual. We live in a time, as is evidenced by this very video, that we can access so much information and education, even through just our own powers. So perhaps there's a topic that you are interested in that you want to know more about. Become the master of that topic. Know more about it than anyone else in the world. Or maybe it's your social life or your emotional life. I think in spaces when life is kind of on pause, you don't know which way to go, that provides the space to explore how we relate to other people, how we might grow in loving and even just making other people feel welcome. So look at your life. Think about Jonah Goldsmith, the most interesting man in the world, and say, in this space, when I have a little more room, how can I become more interesting in these different areas of my life? Trusting that that very act might lead you to what needs to come next. The final thing that I think we need to do in these seasons of our life when we're floundering is to try not to be a total mess. Now, this I got from a wonderful prayer that I read on Sufjan Stevens' Tumblr. And the thing I enjoyed about it was that it was a very achievable goal. He doesn't say, don't be a mess. He says, try not to be a total mess. So you can still be a mess. Just try not to be a mess. And don't even try not to be a mess. Try not to be a total mess. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. It's hard being a young person in this world. We've come into kind of a chaotic generation, and it's difficult to know where to go next, how to get jobs, how to get married. All these things are real pressing existential things. And I think that kind of overarching dread can sometimes paralyze us. But something that my mom said really helped me. In my early 20s, she looked at me and she said, don't wait to begin your life until you reach a certain point. Buy the dishes you want now. If there's some item in your life that would make you feel like an adult, do that now. Do what you can to bring order out of the chaos of your life, even if you can't control the big things outside of yourself. So for me, that means that I treat my home like a place that matters. I think there's so much empowerment that comes out of making your space, no matter how small it is, even if it's a dorm room, a place that is ordered and beautiful and that makes room for other people. I think that trying not to be a total mess, in whatever way that means, whether that is in the food that you cook or the space you create in your home, or buying that article of kitchenware from one of my friends, it was sharp knives. He said, I'll buy sharp knives when I get a full-time job. And I was like, buy sharp knives now. Try not to be a total mess. Don't wait until a future point. Do the little things that you can now, both to bring yourself happiness, but also to proclaim that you have agency in your life. I love the idea of cosmos and chaos, right? When we think about God's work in the world, it goes from chaos, darkness, swirling, nothingness, confusion. God always comes in and makes cosmos. And that's where we get the words like cosmopolitan and cosmetics. It's this sense of bringing order and beauty out of chaos. And I think that when we do that in our own lives, even in small ways, like creating a beautiful home, we move ourselves forward, declaring that there is some beauty in this chaos and that we are not victims of it. So those are 3 small things that have helped me move through seasons of the dark wood of life. And I can say this without irony and without being overly earnest or idealistic. Honestly, those dark woods of my life have been the ones that have shaped me most when I didn't know which way was up. It was shaping who I was as a person, stretching those muscles so that as I moved into bigger arenas, more serious relationships, I had practiced those virtues. And that, I think, is really what happiness is about. It's not something we just experience. It's something we practice and something we cultivate. Someone that I respect likes to say that happiness is always a result. It's either a result of good things happening in your life, or it's the result of a practiced habit of attention and thankfulness and agency. So I hope that these 3 little tips of listening to your life, becoming the most interesting person in the world, and trying not to be a total mess will help you cultivate that practice of attention. Thank you. Read my 9 rules for a lighter, braver, wiser life in my new book, Aggressively Happy, A Realist's Guide to Believing in the Goodness of Life, which is 35% off with free shipping exclusively for Culture Summit attendees. Go to bakerbookhouse.com to buy my book, Aggressively Happy, using the promo code QIdeas to get your discount at checkout.
Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing that. I hope it put a smile on your face as you listened to Joy really lay out these ideas and these thoughts, and even practically how you can listen to your life, become the most interesting person in the world, and try not to be a total mess. I mean, that's pretty practical, right? Sometimes we wake up in the morning and you just know the day is going to be a mess. How do we work hard to not be in a mess every day? And how do we cultivate the joy? How do we cultivate this happiness? I want to commend this book to you. I think you'll find it not only encouraging for you, a great thing to read with other people who are on the journey with you in your community. Maybe it's a good friend who you're walking through life with and you've shared some of the struggles, but you go, you know what? Let's focus on some of the ways in which we can cultivate happiness. And if you use promo code QIdeas when you check out at bakerbookhouse.com, you're going to get a serious discount on the book Aggressively Happy. And so I hope you'll do that, and we hope you'll have a happy week.